Hi guys, so your next lesson is on Marxism, so Marxist theory. Now on the first slide you will see that it says that Marxism is a conflict theory. What that essentially means is that it's any theory that sees society based on conflict between two groups. And Marxists believe that society is based on conflict between the ruling class and the working class. So we'll look at what that means. Now, on the second slide, you've seen there's an image of a man holding a dog, and it says, what do you think this image is of? Now, what this image is of is a man sharing an £800 glass of champagne with a dog. Now, this is just to demonstrate the extreme concentration of wealth that we have in this country. And the next slide shows that even further. So we've got the most expensive house in the UK. Compared to the fact that we have a housing crisis with 17,500 children woke up homeless on Christmas Day this year. We've got the most expensive donut, which was £2,000 compared to the proportion of food banks that needed to be sent out in one area of the country. And we've got the most expensive wedding dress, which is 17.5 million, compared to the fact that a third of families felt they couldn't afford school uniform. So this shows that in this country, or in any capitalist country, we've got an unfair distribution of wealth, with a small concentration of people having a high proportion of the wealth. Now, what these on the next slide, you can see two key terms that you need to note this down. The ruling class are the owners of the means of production. So it's anyone who owns all the major companies in society, people who own like Starbucks, Wetherspoons, whoever. They have the high concentration of wealth. Then on the other side, we've got the working class. They're the remaining 99% of society who don't own the means of production, and they have to sell their labour in order to make money. So you might work at a shop yourself or in a restaurant or whatever. You're selling your labour to make money, so you're a member of the working class. So you need to get those down. Now, this is where Marxist thinks that the conflict arises in society, because you have the ruling class who want to maintain their wealth, and then you've got the working class who are going to want a more equal aspect of society. So there's conflict between these two groups. So we're going to look at 3 paragraphs today about how Marxists think that the family serves the needs of the ruling class. They don't like the family, so we need to look at how they think it serves the needs of the ruling class. On the next slide, you can see a picture of communist Cuba. So communism is what Marxists want. If you want to note this down, communist is a society where there is no money and all goods are shared equally. So in this picture, you can see food being shared out to different groups, and it's logged all on a book, which demonstrates the sharing of goods rather than money. Okay, paragraph 1 is how wealth is concentrated. So if you're a member of the ruling class, you are going to want to maintain your wealth, and you're going to want to pass your wealth on to your legitimate children. So this paragraph is looking at how the family allows that. Now, there's 3 images. The first image you can see on the first slide is a mammoth. Now, during this time, people would have hunted for goods and shared these out equally. So once they'd hunted this mammoth, everyone would have got an equal share. Next to where it says economy, if you can label this as primitive communism, because this is what it was. It was everyone sharing goods equally and there was no money. So the economy type at this time was primitive communism. Now at this time it asked what the dominant family type was, and the answer was there was no family. No one cared who their children were. People would have collectively cared for the children, and no one would have known who their father was. And at this time Karl Marx would have liked this, because he said this would have meant that women were free and liberated to have sex with who they wanted. Now, between then and the next slide, we've got what's called the development of the mode of production. So all of a sudden, things like factories and mills are developed, and this is where our 2 classes appear. You've got those who own these factories and mills, and those who don't. So you've got a concentration of ownership. Now, you've got to think, this is the development, a type of economy here is the development of capitalism, with those who own the means of production and those who don't. So that's the type of capitalism. Now, if you're existing in capitalism and you are a member of the ruling class, you are going to want to ensure that your wealth gets passed down to your legitimate children. However, if women are allowed to sleep with whoever they want to, you're not going to know who your legitimate children are. So that's where the dominant family type changed, because the ruling class invented marriage. Now, Karl Marx thinks that marriage was invented so that the Men, the rich men, could lock their women into a contract that they could only sleep with them. This meant that the ruling class knew that their children were, the children that women had were their children, and it meant that they could pass on their legitimate wealth to them. This meant that women, so you can label that, write that next to dominant family type. This meant that the women were locked in to this relationship, and Karl Marx said that was a bad thing because they were stuck in one relationship. Okay, finally, in the future, Karl Marx thinks at some point we will have a revolution and communism will occur. And if you remember, communism, if you want to label this economy, is all goods shared equally, no money. Now, at this time, no one's going to care who they pass their legitimate wealth on to. So with family type, the family's going to go away. We're not going to have families anymore. People won't care who their legitimate children are. And within this, what is going to happen is people are going to pass on, people aren't going to care who they pass their wealth on to. So you're going to get what's called communes. And this is where groups of people live together and collectively care for the children without caring who their biological children are. And with that, women are going to be allowed to have sexual relations with who they want. So that is how the family changes across periods of time. And at the minute in capitalism, how the family allows people to ensure the concentration of wealth. Your evaluation for that day is Karl Marx has assumed in all capitalist cultures that the nuclear family is dominant, where in fact that is incorrect, because we know a large portion of people are born in either single parent families, maybe same-sex families. We've got family diversity. So his theory fails to explain that. So if you note that down as your evaluation. Okay, paragraph 2 looks at this term ideology. So if you remember the ruling class, you are going to want your workers to do what they're told and not question inequality. So somehow you've got to shape their thinking into believing that. On the next slide, you've got a definition for ideology, which is a set of ideas and beliefs that are taught to us, in this case by the ruling class. And you've got two things that the ruling class are going to want us to believe. One, that inequality is fair. One, that inequality is fair, and two, that you need to work and be compliant for your boss. So our next paragraph is going to look at how the family ensures that we do this. Okay, first of all, you've got a slide that says hierarchy. Now, hierarchy is a concentration of one person at the top and the workers underneath, and that one person at the top is able to control our time, how we work, and and when we work. So with this, you've got a hierarchy. Now, this isn't natural. We're not born accepting a hierarchy, and we can actually see it's quite unfair that one person gets to control our behaviour. So we need to be socialised, in other words, taught, to believe that's okay. And Karl Marx says this is done in the family, and he calls it a mini hierarchy. And a mini hierarchy is where you have the father at the top and the children doing what the father says. So you get used to having your time controlled, like your bedtime, your action controlled, and you don't question it when you enter the workplace. So we're socialised to accept that hierarchy in the mini hierarchy. The next is family as a haven. Now, if you remember we looked at functionalism, they said the family is like a warm bath that helps us relax. Now, Karl Marx, in a sense, agrees with this, but he thinks it's a bad thing. Underneath, there is a clip of a boss yelling at their worker. You might want to click on that clip and listen to it to give you an idea of some of the exploitation that exists within the workplace. That's just one type of exploitation. There's several types of exploitation that exist in the workplace, like sexual harassment, making people overwork, ignoring people's human rights exist in the workplace. Now, we would think that people would stand up and go against that. But what happens is you experience that exploitation, and then every night you go home and you experience a sense of relaxation from the home. You calm down, which means the next day you're prepared to go back in and experience more exploitation. Karl Marx thinks that's a bad thing, because what that means is we will never stand up against the ruling class and have communism. He wants us to remain angry and stand up against the ruling class and fight against them. So he doesn't like that aspect of it. However, to criticise this assumes that we're passive puppets who just accept how we're socialised, ignores that many people choose to go against the norms of society and rebel against the ruling class and rebel against what powerful people tell us. Even things like Black Lives Matter shows that we're prepared to stand up and fight against what we think's right. Any problems, let me know. Hope that was useful. Bye.